Welcome to Pawpaw's Workshop. Today is day 3 of my segmented bowl turning project. In today's video, I'm actually going through the process of how to assemble the bowl, preparing it to be able to turn. And I'm showing you a couple different methods on how to glue the bowl together. The other thing is, based on some questions that I had, I've gone back just a little bit and I'm talking a little bit more in detail about how I use the sled to be able to cut the wedges. So let's get started. I had a number of questions about how to use this sled from the last videos, so I wanted to take a little bit of extra time today and show you a little bit more in detail how it's used. I have everything in place now ready to go. This sled moves freely, and also on the left side of the screen I have the guide that controls the length of each wedge. To cut this bowl out, I'm using 12 segments, and that's at 30 degrees. So I'm using this template for my setup of my sled itself. And all I do is I can just drop it in place, and I want to make sure that it is square with the lines that I have in place, right along that point. And then I can take another piece of wood that I know is straight and just slide it into the sled, and then using my template, line it up to make sure that it fits exactly with no gap at all. Then I tighten everything down. Now the next thing that I'm going to do, these boards were 1 5/8, and there were 2 of them that were the 1 5/8. The outer board width of that was 2 inches, and I have 2 of them that are the same. So I need 12 and 12. So that's 24 segments that I need to be able to cut. Now I didn't show cutting the long sticks 1 5/8. I didn't think that was really necessary. The only other thing that I did to be able to get the wedges cut accurately is I just used the stop measured over my 2 inches to be able to cut consistent wedges. Now safety is very important. Please use a stick of some type to be able to move the wedges away from the saw blade or turn the saw off to move them. Now I've cut the first ring, and I want to just double check to make sure that all of the joints are perfectly tight, because if it's not, then I have to make some adjustments. Now to hold this ring together, I'm just using several rubber bands, and for a small bowl such as this, the rubber band works well. Now if you look at this, those joints are very tight, and that's what I'm looking for. So now that I know that the sled is accurate, I can go ahead and cut the remaining of the rings for this bowl. Now that I've got this together, I'm just holding it together with a couple of rubber bands at the moment. And don't forget, I haven't sanded anything yet. It's time to assemble all of the different rings. Now I know I showed this in the previous video, but there will be some out there who have not seen it. So I just have to sand each one of these segments to get rid of the little pieces of tear out off of the edges, and then I can just go ahead and glue them together. And I'm going to put a link up top to the previous videos so that you can watch this in more detail. With all of the rings completed, it's time to be able to sand the surface of them. And now I'm holding my vacuum hose. Looks like that's going to have to be another video, building an attachment for that to be able to hold it right up to catch the sawdust. But only thing that I need to do on this step is just lightly sand the surface and make sure that it's completely flat. Now because my sanding disc is actually smaller than the bowl, I still need to be able to just slightly rotate the ring to be able to get full, complete coverage over the entire surface. It's a little minor inconvenience, but it is something that you have to be aware of. Otherwise, you're not going to get a flat ring, and that's the most critical part at this stage. I'll continue this step now for each of the rings until I have all of them sanded. I wanted to get a close-up view for you so you could actually see the sanding process. Now this ring is just about the same size as the sanding disc, but I find it still is easier to be able to rotate it just a little bit to make sure that I'm sanding evenly throughout the entire surface. While I'm sanding, I think it's also important to stop every few minutes and take a look at the ring itself, because I want to make sure that it's sanding even and that it's flat. Now this ring's actually pretty easy to do and it's looking really good. If I have a ring that for some reason was a little bit rough, I'll actually put a pencil line around the ring so as I sand it I know that I'm sanding evenly, and I'll sand away that pencil line. The next thing I'm doing is I just took a scrap piece of a 2x4 and put it into the chuck, and I'm going to go ahead and turn that round and basically create a tenon to be able to have the chuck support this wood. And on top of this wood, I am going to glue each of the segments to it. This is going to be my waste block. So after just a couple minutes of turning this scrap piece of wood, I had the tenon that I'm looking for. So I'm just going to turn this around and remount it into the chuck. And then I'm going to go ahead and do the same exact process. I'm going to get all of these square corners off and turn it round. Now the most important part is I need to make sure that this surface is completely flat, because I'm going to be gluing the rings onto this flat surface. So I'm actually using a parting tool here to be able to cut this nice and flat. And then I take the sandpaper on a block of wood and sand it, and this will ensure that it's perfectly flat. Okay, the block is now ready. It is perfectly smooth and flat, and I can go ahead and glue on the first ring. Now, like everything else, I like to test fit everything, so I'm going to just put this in place and make sure that it's perfectly flat. Now that I know that it's perfectly flat, I can go ahead and take some glue, and I'm going to put that onto the surface and have good coverage. I do not want this bowl to break apart from this scrap piece of wood. So I'll put a smooth coat on, and then I'm going to go ahead and line up the first ring number 1 onto the bottom of this. Now to get the proper alignment, I'm just going to bring the tailstock right up and temporarily hold that right in position. After double checking to make sure that it's dead center, I'm going to go ahead and put just a little scrap block in here so that I can go ahead and add some pressure on that glue joint to hold it tight. The next thing I like to do is just put a little bit of hot glue on this ring to be able to help hold it in place while it's drying. You don't really need a lot of hot glue, but I do like to have a ring of the hot glue going all the way around the entire ring. Okay, the first ring is gluing over on the lathe, and I'm going to work on the next 2 rings. Now I put a little pencil mark exactly where the center was, and I'm just adding the glue now. I'm going to spread that glue out evenly and put this next ring into place. Now to clamp these 2 rings, I have a dedicated clamp that I use for the ring, and I just slip it right in place, make sure that it's centered, and then I can clamp it down. Now it's not necessary to have a lot of force, but the pressure does need to be even. So I just want to make sure that I clamp it down tight enough to be able to hold it securely in place. So the only thing I need to do now is let these rings dry, and then I'm going to go ahead and add these 2 rings over onto the lathe. Now the next thing I do, I just went ahead and set this down, measured on each side, centered everything. Once I had it exactly where I wanted it, I just went ahead and drew a pencil line all the way around. And then that shows exactly where I need to put the glue. And then I can put that right back in place. So there we go. That's exactly where it needs to be. And then just to double check, I'll measure these. That is 15/16. That is 15/16. There we go. So that's centered all the way around. So now I'll go ahead and clamp that in position. Now rather than put this back on the lathe, I think I'm just going to go ahead and use this clamp to be able to hold it in place this time. And again, this just shows some of the different options that you have. You can do it multiple ways. And I just slide it over to the center of the rack and then tighten it down. I'll let this sit now for about a half an hour and I'll add a couple more rings. I want you to look at this bowl and I bet you can see what's wrong. And you guys may have picked up on it earlier. I didn't catch it in time because I was too much concentrating on trying to do a video and not looking at what I was doing. But if you actually look, I put a ring in out of place. So this is going to mean that I am going to have to modify my bowl just a little bit, but that's part of what turning is all about, is being able to be a little bit creative when you make a mistake. Now I'm going to let this dry overnight, and then I'm going to put this on the lathe and start turning, and we're going to fix this mistake by turning and creating the shape that will work for it. The other thing is, I do have the other half of the bowl over here, and we'll add those rings after I turn the bottom half of the bowl. Hi everyone, thank you for watching my video today. If you like the video, please go ahead and hit the subscribe button down below and the little bell next to it so you'll be notified on the different videos that I upload. Also check out the videos over here to be able to stay up to date on the happenings in my shop. So again, thank you for watching my videos.